Okay, it's redirecting us to YouTube. I believe that we are live streaming. Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, so I will call the meeting to order. We're going to just do a roll call from who I can see on the screen. If you would just say here when I call your name, that will be helpful and we'll get started. Rodney Rice.
Here.
Crystal Galladay.
Here.
Tracy Friedlander.
Here.
Hoyt.
Here.
Amy Richardson.
Here.
Carlos Bonner.
Here.
All right. Miss Moore.
Who was just before Hoyt? I'm sorry. That one I didn't get.
Was it Tracy?
I think it was Amy.
Amy.
Yeah,
Thank you.
after,
Yeah, it was Amy.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
And then Miss Bryant is with us as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we're going to start this board meeting this morning. I don't hear an echo. Anybody else hearing an echo?
No.
No? Okay, cool. All right. And then our first order of business is to review and approve the minutes. So if you have had a chance to look at that in the binder, if there are any corrections or questions, the floor is open for that. Once people have had a chance, I'll take a motion for accepting the minutes.
Heather, you're muted.
Oh, I was saying, once people have had a chance to look at the minutes, I can accept a motion for accepting them. No, you can't hear me, Erica?
I hear you.
Oh, okay.
I hear you.
Okay,
we
cool.
We can hear you. Yeah.
I thought I was muted. Still.
I don't know if
Also,
Erica can hear you.
Yeah. Also, Robin has joined.
Thank you.
And Bill. Good morning, Robin. Thank you for joining.
Morning, all.
Are people still reading?
I think there's a glitch in the matrix.
Are we ready for a motion, Heather?
Yeah. That's what I'm saying.
Oh wait,
I'm inviting anyone.
Erica Bryan is still having audio problems. So I don't.
Yep.
Are we allowed to proceed?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think so.
Okay. This is Amy. I make a motion that we accept the minutes from the March 2021 board meeting.
Thank you. We have one motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you, Rodney. There's a second. So, oh, now I do hear the echo.
Yeah, that's me. Okay, you
okay.
shouldn't in a minute. Thank you.
Okay.
You hear one now?
No, I don't hear it.
No,
Okay,
you sound well, Miss Moore.
okay. I figured out how to see you, but that involved an echo temporarily. Okay.
Okay. So we have a motion, and the motion's been seconded to accept the meeting minutes, the minutes for the meeting. And so I'm going to roll call to take a vote on that. Okay. Rodney?
Yeah.
Carlos?
Aye.
Crystal?
Aye.
Hoyt?
Aye.
Tracy?
Aye.
Amy?
Aye.
Robin?
Aye.
Janice?
Aye.
All right. Good morning. All right. The ayes have it. So we are accepting the board meeting minutes. I don't know why I can't say meeting minutes today. We are going to move on to the next item on our agenda, which is the finance report. So I think I saw Bill join us. I will turn it over to you, Bill.
Good morning, everyone.
From the beach,
Wishful thinking on my part. Okay. Well, there's a couple things I want to go over. I'm going to go over the third quarter financials. And also I'm going to do a preliminary budget as well, or a presentation. So let me. Here we go. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, crap. I have the wrong one. Sorry about that. I'm looking for the. Yes. Okay, did your screen switch? And I apologize for this. I'm not used to moving around on Zoom with the different sheets. But anyways, what we have up here is our third quarter financials, budget versus actuals. And this is a summary version. As you can see, we have our income, which as we go down through per pupil, right now is over budget, but that's more, not so much that we're actually going to be over budget, but as it's more the calendarization of the budget. We're probably going to come more right on budget. Federal entitlements are above, but once again, that's more that I was able to get more of the reimbursements in sooner. So overall, our public funds are ahead of budget. Other government funds are right on budget. Private grants and donations are lagging behind budget. We're about 58,000 behind budget. The big one, what really skews this, is other income, which is the PPP loan forgiveness, which we have not received yet. If you remember, I had at the last board meeting, I had put in the application, but we were about $60,000 or $70,000 shy of the total forgiveness. So we were able to take the application back and redo it. And I'm in the process of starting that now. So as we talk about the budget, this is really a question of where this money is going to fall. So right now we don't have it, but that, as you can see, from a budget point of view, it really skews our income portion. It looks like we're behind budget by $1.1 million. And if you look down at expenses, once again, most of the expenses, with the exception of salaries, which is running pretty much right on budget, slightly ahead, they're all, we're under spending on the other categories. Part of this is the money that we put aside, the contingency funds, because we really did not know, what we would need to operate the school year this year. So overall, where we are right now is a net income of $1.1 million as of the third quarter. If you remember from our last board meeting, my forecast had us with a slight deficit of about $80,000. Right now, if I had to put out a number, I'd say we're probably going to have a slight surplus based on some information I just got. There was a grant approval that did not factor into my forecast. So that should be able to skew us in the other direction. There's other variables that might hit it. But right now, this year looks, without the PPP loan forgiveness, like we should hit our budget of at least a break even. Are there any questions on the income statement versus budget for March? Okay. Let's see if I can get to the balance sheet. Did the screen change to the balance sheet?
It looks the same for me.
Yeah, it's the same.
Okay, hang on a second. Okay, now do you have a balance sheet with total bank accounts as the first line item?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh. Okay. So this is our balance sheet as of March, and there's really not that much different from the other balance sheets. Our cash are ahead of where we were last year. A lot of that has to do with the PPP loan. So there's not really a lot to say other than receivables are up, and our bank account the receivables are up because of the grant reimbursements that I put in. The cash has really been pretty steady right along. And, the other assets are where they are. Down in the liability section, really the only thing that looks a little bit different is accounts payable. And one reason accounts payable is up is because of the coronavirus, because in March of 2020, we were doing check runs probably every week or every 2 weeks, somewhere around there. It's spaced out more. We're more at almost a month, depending on how things go. And also mail delivery spotty. We end up having to pick up the mail too. So it's not like we don't have the money or we're not doing it. It's just taking a little bit longer. So any questions on the balance sheet? Okay, I'm going to go on to the budget. And okay. What should be up on the screen now is the budget assumptions for school year 22-21. And so our first assumption is enrollment, because as you know, the majority of our funding usually comes from the per pupil allowance. And it's based on the number of children, it's based on the grade they're in, there's a number of factors associated. But we're adding a third grade at East End, and our budget enrollment that we've put forth in is 638, excuse me, which is an increase of 55 students. And so in addition to the enrollment, the other assumptions we have that affect the income is our per pupil allowance. The mayor came out and said that there'd be a 3.6% increase in the per pupil allowance. So that's reflected there. I'm also, that loan forgiveness, like I said, is going to end up in one of 2 years. For the purposes of this, I'm putting it into the budget again because it's May and we haven't gotten the forgiveness, so there's a good chance it will be. And then we have the ESSER grants, which are the grants that the federal government are going to be providing to help us reopen. And right now we have allocations of $1.4 million for those grants. So that's all part of the income that we're budgeting. In addition, since we're back in school, we're also going to be having the aftercare program for the students. We're budgeting $200K there. And I'll say right now, as we get down below, but usually after the after school program does provide some income. I'm not budgeting it for this year because of the fact it's going to be different. You know, just break even is what we're looking for. The other assumption we have is Stokes Kitchen will continue to serve one school, Maya. So those are the budget assumptions for income. Our expense assumptions are we're budgeting a 3% salary increase. The other, oh, I thought someone said something. The other hiring, we're hiring 4 third grade teachers plus learning specialists to support them. In addition, we're hiring 3 teachers for Brooklyn because of the social distancing requirements. In addition to that, we're also going to be hiring learning support staff to help with that. So all that is factored into this budget. The other expense, you know, I have aftercare expenses at $200K. Like I said before, this is to, you know, a break even aftercare. All other expenses, and by that, all other of our normal expenses, this is student costs, occupancy, general office. I'm projecting a 20% increase, and a 20% increase from what we have this year. That's based on 2 things. The first is that we're increasing the number of students by about 10%. So that's part of it. The other is I'm factoring in a 10% for inflation on our normal cost. And once again, that's not really knowing what's going to be happening, not knowing if there's going to be shortages, costs are going to increase. That's what we're going to have there. The other 2 expense things that we have in for next year are in order to open and bring our students back. We have modular classroom expenses. We're going to be leasing 3 modular classrooms. The total cost I'm estimating at $200,000. In addition to that, we don't know what our other social distancing expenses are, because in order to get the maximum number of students back into the building safely, you know, there are some other things that are going to be incurred. You know, one of it could be busing from one location to the other, but that's what I'm showing that as a separate item so we don't mix it in. Last year I ended up mixing it in with the regular expenses. This year I'm showing it as a separate item. So are there any questions on my assumptions?
Hey, Bill, you mentioned this is for you hear me?
Yes.
You for the aftercare income, you budgeted $200K, right?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry. I thought I heard you. I thought I heard you say 100K, but I just
No.
Okay.
No, I have that as a break-even point.
Yep.
So now I'm going to share the preliminary budget summary based on the assumptions that I have in. Now, we have the 3 columns here. The first column is the approved budget from this year that we're operating on and what I was talking about versus the income statement. Second column, the forecast, is what I had presented at the last board meeting, saying this is my expectations where we think we're going to end up. And it's based on, and those are the expenses there. Third one is a preliminary budget. And as you can see, all my assumptions factor into this: the per pupil allowance, the other government funds. The other government funds, the main proponent of that are those ESSER grants, private grants and donations. I have around 50,000. Since the students are back, I'm budgeting some activity fees, about 5,000. The other income obviously is the PPP loan forgiveness, and then fundraising, at 10,000. And, we have the breakfast and lunch fees, once again, 52K. So our total income that I'm budgeting is $15 million, $15.8 million. When we get down to expenses, salary expenses, that includes all the new hires plus the 3% increase. We have an $11.2 million salary budget. All the other expenses, with the exception, include the 20% increase. The one that really looks funky would be occupancy, because that includes that $500,000 of additional expenses for social distancing. So overall, what I'm budgeting right now is a break-even budget at 22K surplus. Any questions?
Bill, just as a point of clarification, I'm looking at the school years. I don't understand the 21-20. Is that the 2021 or what is that number? I'm just curious as to.
Okay, school year is, the way I have it is school year 22. Our school year 22 ends in June of 2022 and it starts in July of 2021. School year 21-20, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Bill, a question for you. I heard you mention that you were made aware of a grant recently, and that would impact the current school year.
Yes.
Did I hear? Okay. Is that it? I take that as that's not represented in the 21-20 forecast, correct?
Yeah, that's the forecast I had presented before. And actually, I just found out about it on May 6th, I think.
Yeah.
That's when the grant was approved. So.
Okay. Yeah, I figured it was recent. But what I'm saying is that is not in the, that has to be updated in the forecast for 21-20. Is that correct?
It would be part of the updated forecast, yes.
Bill, is it reasonable to assume, based upon your budget, if we obtain 1 or 2 additional schools for the kitchen, the Stokes kitchen to serve, we can have a better cushion in our budget? That
Depending on the schools and depending on the expenses, obviously there would be some type of cushion associated with that. Yeah. We'd have a better cushion if our donations were up too,
okay. Well,
That's actually an easier road than additional schools in.
Yeah, well, thinking of, and that's a great point too, but thinking through the school year, and maybe the question I ultimately have is, do we know if any schools have reached out for us?
I don't.
Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think it's likely that we will have additional schools.
Okay.
Is there a particular rationale for that that you would share, Erica, or no? I mean, the lift of all the health precautions that folks are going to have to be under, and I know actually feeding and doing lunch has been a real challenge across schools for social distancing. So I imagine that the market is much lower and that people are actually doing lunch in more simple ways, feeding kids in school, in their classrooms, et cetera. So that's why I think, Carlos, there might not be a lot of market.
Mhm.
Understood. I have the reverse option issue at my home. My son wants to go to school to eat, so, so but he's not normal, but all right.
I wanted a little bit of clarity on, I believe it's total 4130. I believe it's line 30. If you can elaborate on that, you have to go up one. Can you talk about the government funds? Yes, line 26, sorry.
Okay, the government funds, that is the primary 1.4 million of the $1.45 million is the money from the ESSER grants. And those were based on the allocations that were given to us. The other 50,000 is I'm budgeting a SOAR grant in there. So that's what the other government funds are.
Okay, and it is the rationale that we didn't receive them this school year because the students weren't in school the whole year, or is it just a new acquired grant?
It's a new grant. It's
Okay.
one specifically for reopening and getting the kids back into the school.
Thank you for that clarification.
Anything else?
Any other trustee questions? All right, Bill. Thank you so much for the report. Okay. You can go back to the beach. Is that what you're saying?
I have a question before Bill leaves.
Oh, sure.
When do we expect that we will have a final budget that the board can vote on?
The budget that you have here and Finance Committee, jump in if I'm misspeaking, I would say is about 95% what you're going to see. Based on our meeting yesterday, there's going to be some minor tweaking going on, but I don't think you're going to see any major revisions to what I presented today.
So, Ms. Moore, this is Hoyt. I think yesterday what we discussed was is that we would review, we'd have an executive committee in the very near future. I think it was next month. And Erica, please correct me if I'm wrong. To review to review the final version of the budget, and then we can present that to the full board via a call or another means to approve by the full board. That way we'll still meet the deadline for submitting this to submitting a budget for the next school year.
And when is the final budget submission date? Do we know? I know there was some talk about a different date.
The end of July.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Erica, did you want to say anything about external factors that are driving the delay in budgeting generally, or no? Okay.
I can answer that. I mean, it's because the city budget hasn't been approved.
So I am having a serious delay lag between video and audio. So I'm following what you guys are saying, but it's kind of difficult for me to chime in. I'm sorry.
So just to clarify, and we'll wrap this part of the agenda up. The city budget had been delayed. The mayor made an announcement that it was going to be delayed. And so those allocations have just come. And then, of course, the additional, Crystal had asked, the additional federal and state options for re-entry, those additional dollars have just come too. So there's a slight lag in when we will see as a board the completed budget, but we're aligned to those new deadlines, I think is what Ms. Moore was making sure that we were going forward in a good way. So let me just, one last call. Are there any other questions, concerns about the financial report? All right, hearing none, I'm going to go to the next item on the agenda. So thank you, Bill. We have to call.
We need, Heather, this is Wade. Do we need to approve the quarterly report that Bill does?
No, I don't think we need to approve that.
Okay.
I don't think we need to approve it. I think we just need to receive it and have it reflected in the note.
Okay. I wasn't sure. That's why I asked. I knew you would know.
Yep. Well, I don't know if I know or not. I'm making an executive decision. And Erica is saying, no, we don't usually approve it, I think. So I think we're all right. I think we're good. The next item on the agenda is academic performance data. And of course, we had Ms. Julia come a while ago and talk to us about some of the challenges. And of course, no, is she not joining? I'm going to talk to Erica on the chat so she doesn't have to deal with it. Is Julia ready? I'm just remembering, trustees, that Miss Julia came.
Julia is joining the meeting.
Cool.
I do not see her.
She's not here yet.
Here.
Yeah. So you trustees, you may recall that we were bringing students in for assessment because the last time we got some information about academics, they were sort of all over the place. And you could see that either students weren't sort of doing the assessment or maybe perhaps their families were supporting them in doing the assessments. It was hard to get an authentic sense for where students might be experiencing difficulty and what kind of mastery they were having. So I think the school has completed some of those assessments and bringing students back. And then of course, you all know that the school welcomed scholars back on the 26th for the hybrid schedule as well. So we think there's a lot more information to learn about where students are academically. It looks like Erica's figuring out how to get Julia in the room. So here she goes. Bye, Hoyt.
Good morning.
Good morning, Miss Julia. We are turning the mic over to you. Thank you for joining.
Perfect. Do I have screen sharing capability? All right. How's everybody doing today?
Good.
Good. All right. So let me just. So today I'd just like to share with you all the winter NWA data. And so this is the testing data that I administered in February and March. So it's our most recent standardized testing data. And then I'd like to talk to you a little bit about our academic recovery planning. So just to kind of orient you to this graph, this is our winter 2021 NWA reading data. And the dark green bar is our achievement data and the light green bar is our growth data. And this assessment, NWA is a nationally normed assessment. And so what that means is that, several years ago, they did a norming study and they put students on a growth curve. And so the expectation in normal times is that a typical student across the United States is scoring at the 50th percentile, both for achievement and for growth, right? And so this is growth from 2020, which was our last, winter 2020, which was our last time that we did our assessment in-house before pandemic, to this most recent assessment here, which was done both in person and at home. So this is a combination of data from students who took the test both in the school building and also at home. And so, like, as always, right, especially when we're talking about elementary school students, assessment data like this is a snapshot in time, right? And so we don't want to put too much weight on this one data point, but it is important for us to look at to sort of assess our progress. So as you can see, our students are still scoring in this dark green bar here, overall at a little bit above the 60th percentile. So that means that our kids are doing better than a typical student in the United States in a normal time, right? In our reading data, our growth score is just right around the 38th percentile as a median. So that means that the growth hasn't been as expected, like on the expected trajectory, right? We're looking for a growth score at least at the 50th percentile. But as you can see, it is lower than that. And so you can see our kindergarten students scored really well, first grade as well, in terms of achievement. But as you can see, the growth scores kind of generally across the board are not where they need to be. And I'll just orient you a little bit to the axis here. Kindergarten Brookland is KBR, and then you can see the East End scores here as well. So EE meaning East End. So I'll just give you a second to kind of look at that graph. If you have any questions, just let me know about what this means.
And I do have a question. In regards to the growth score, I see there isn't one for kindergarten. Is it because you're taking the data from the prior year, which will be kindergarten, and looking at it based on first grade, like comparing it that way?
Yep, exactly. So our kindergartners. So what I did for this this interpretation was I took winter 2020 data and I put their median growth percentile on here. So kindergartners did not have a winter 2020 data point. So that's why they don't have any growth scores at the moment. I did not, I know I did do assessments in the fall of 2020, but I didn't put those scores on here because I felt like they weren't necessarily the most accurate data points, particularly because we did all of that at home.
Yeah, I remember you sharing that, Julia, but you said this round also, some of these tests were administered in person and some were administered at home. Are there any effects that you can see or predict or theorize on this round of data?
Yeah, absolutely. So, so we found that we did about half of our students, and I can pull that data up for you if you'd like. I didn't put it in this presentation, but about half of our students tested at the school building and half of them tested at home. And what I found was that the students who tested in the school building, their growth scores were markedly lower. And so you can interpret that in many ways, right? Like one is that they weren't, you know, with the additional supervision and support at school, like they weren't, they didn't have quite as much access to sort of their home environments where they can get support wherever they wanted, right? And so that's one way to interpret that. The other piece might be like if it was their first time in the school building, right? And so you may not, you know, like you can take that as you'd like it, right? Like it was their first time in the school building in a year, and it was their first time really interacting in the NWA test in that way. So you know, like I said, like we take this data in a broader picture, and we're taking reading data and assessment data from our math curriculum and all of that to like make this picture. But I think it is an important thing to look at. Does that make sense? And then I also took a look at the subgroup data with our reading scores. And so here you have our English language learners, our special education students, economically disadvantaged, which would mean anybody who is who qualifies for free or reduced lunch. At-risk students, which is students who qualify for TANF, SNAP benefits, homeless students. These are our Black students, our Hispanic students, our multiracial students, and our white students. And so I thought it was important to look at that as well. So as you can see, in terms of our subgroups, not very many of them are meeting our achievement benchmarks there. Our Black students, our multiracial students, and our white students are. And the growth scores are also pretty low across the board.
So can you elaborate on the purpose of this exam so everyone can have a common understanding? And
Absolutely.
what are we going to do with this data?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. So this is an assessment that we give typically 3 times a year when we're in the school building. And it gives us a normed percentile where students are achieving. We use this mostly when we're in normal times to track students' progress and identify kids who need interventions, as well as sort of assessing our program in general. For now, like what we wanted to really do was take a look at this data to help us plan for academic recovery, which I'll get to in a couple of slides once we take a look at the data. So things like adjusting our curriculum to meet the needs of our kids who are coming into the building who haven't been there for a year and a half. So, but I'll get to that in a couple of slides. Does that make sense, Ms. Holliday?
It does. Thank you.
Before you move from the subgroup slide, what is the relationship between our racial categories and English language learners or SPED? Because, I think in the last couple of rounds of data that we've looked at, we see that our special education students have a low, like they're the lowest bar as a subgroup. And I'm just trying to understand, are there like a couple of different drivers? And that's not, unfortunately, that's not out of realm what we see nationally, but our Hispanic students overrepresented in special education I'm trying to understand that in our school population, like what's going on there.
Well, what I would say for sure is that many of our Hispanic students are also English language learners. So these 2 bars are going to be really pretty close to each other because most of the students who are identified as Hispanic, many of them are also English language learners. They still qualify under that. And also I will say that like our special education subgroup is pretty small in terms of our testing group. So we have about, I think about 20 students represented here, which is not a ton in terms of like getting, high quality data there. So I have not gone through our racial breakdown of our special education students, but I can absolutely put that on my list if that would be helpful.
I think it would be good to know. And the other question that I have, which is really about the earlier slide, is there any, what sense do you make of certain grades having just a lot lower results in terms of their achievement levels? So are there other challenges at the grade level or curriculum level that would be helpful for us to know about to provide more support or, yeah.
That's a great question. One thing I will note, second grade data is always a little bit strange because kindergarten and first grade students take a version of this assessment that's read aloud to them. And so most students, I transitioned them to the non-read aloud version in second grade, unless they're students with special needs or students who are really struggling with reading who can't read independently. And so although NWA claims that the results are comparable, I found that there's typically a pretty significant drop between first and second grade in the growth scores. So that's one thing to note here. And I think you'll see it especially in math. We'll get there in a second. And otherwise, I don't, in terms of like particular challenges, you'll see that our 5th graders are kind of across the board not scoring particularly well on this assessment this year. I'm not sure why that is. It's kind of, it's a new trend for this particular cohort of students. So we're looking at that pretty closely. And we're gonna, be looking at how we can really target their needs for these last couple months of school.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And this is our math data. So you can kind of see, this is really our area of concern at the moment. which tracks with national data around the pandemic learning loss. Students have been, generally performing relatively, like typically in reading, but their math scores have been kind of all over the place. And so I think that we see that here as well. So you can see our achievement is still above the national norm, but our growth score is low. And then you can kind of see our growth is kind of all over the place with those students. And our fifth graders, again, are not scoring very well in their math assessment data this year. And I think this is this example of our second graders, again, with that change in test format. Their growth scores are really low, both at East End and Brookland. So we definitely need to look at that more closely as we move forward with bringing them back into the building.
Can you say more about why math would be hit harder than reading?
Yep. And this is, of course, my interpretation of it, right? So I'm not, an expert in terms of what the research shows in terms of distance learning and all of that. But I would say that the discrete skills that we're teaching in math are a little bit harder to access in a distance learning format, right? So when we are teaching in person, we use a lot of manipulatives. We do a lot of like discussion around our strategies for solving problems, things like that. And although we've tried by creating systems where our schedules allow for small group instruction and things like that, I would say that there's definitely something lacking in terms of kids' ability to access this content when they're not in person. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. This is a longer conversation for another time, but you're testing the discrete skills, but it could be that their math sense has grown because they've been in a different space, but you're not testing
exactly
that math sense, right? And so that's the problem with standardized test data, of course, right?
Yep.
It only measures certain kinds of things and not others. Yeah.
And so what we've done here with our math scores, like particularly after looking at this data, is that we are going through, we're using a new curriculum this year called Zern, because we found that their online platforms are much more accessible than investigations were. They have these mid-mission and end-of-mission assessments, which are the end-of-unit assessments. And so we've been tracking their performance on those, which is given like in a small group setting where there's a handful of kids on Zoom doing it together with their teachers. And so we feel like that may be a more accurate picture of how kids are doing. And so what we've been doing there is we have that all on an Excel sheet, and we're tracking students and trying to figure out, like really dive into what the skills are that they're going to need to work on as they get back into the building next year. Do y'all have any questions on our math data here with our grade levels?
I have a question, Julia.
Yes, ma'am.
It's probably too early for this, but to your knowledge, is there any research available about the effects of distance learning on acquisition of math skills?
I mean,
for elementary school students?
Yeah, so there have been some preliminary studies done, like here in DC even, about that. And there's definitely like the big area of concern for a lot of educators is the math acquisition for next year. So, and I think we have that sort of coupled with our target language acquisition. I don't have that data here, but like those two things I think are going to be kind of key to address when we get back into the building for learning recovery. But yes, sort of across the board nationally, and also in studies locally, that is where kids are struggling in elementary school.
Thank you.
And you can take a look at this. This is our subgroup data for the math scores as well. So we see similar kind of trends across the board here, although our ELL students tend to be performing higher than they were in reading here. Any questions about our subgroup data? And then just to move from forward here, I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about our academic recovery planning. We have focused on a couple of things for next year. We've created goals around these, and we're targeting our professional development to these particular things. And those two are emphasizing our personal, social, and physical education skills. So one of the big things, right, with learning loss for this pandemic year is that students haven't been able to do a lot of social skill building and community building. And so one of the things that we really don't want to lose focus on is doing that thoroughly and well in the beginning of the school year next year. So that's kind of our big push initially, is making sure that they have readiness for learning as they enter the building by building that community. And then the other piece is we're really going to be creating individualized plans for student learning. So what we've found is that kind of across the board, like we can't predict, there are no big trends in terms of where kids are, right? Like kids are picking up different pieces and they're learning a lot outside of our context. Like we're learning a lot in our Zoom school and with our programs, but there's like, they're going to come into our building with just a huge range of abilities and skills, even more than we had seen in the past. And so our focus is going to be on creating those individualized plans for each student, which includes making sure that we're assessing kids robustly early in school year 21-22. So that we can actually start our math and reading interventions like in the first couple of weeks of school. And we can also make sure that we're doing curricular adjustments to meet the needs of our kids. Does anybody have any questions about our academic recovery goals?
Are there any things that are specific to IB instruction and curricula that you've heard from, the broader IB world and that will impact the curricular adjustments you're proposing?
Yep, actually our first goal there, if the IB PYP program it's personal, social, physical education, PSPE, is sort of the big thrust there for us. And so that is actually tied right to that curricular scope and sequence that IB creates. And that, those approaches to learning, which are like the ways that kids access information and access learning, that is what we're really going to be focusing on to make sure that they can learn what they need to learn and we can recover from this year. Absolutely. Any other questions about our academic recovery goals?
This isn't a question, it's just a comment. I think that this particular time provides educators everywhere, and I'm focusing on our school, a real opportunity to do research about what is working for our students, because they will have had a combination of approaches to education, and we may want to look at working with some colleges of education to help us in assessing what we have done right, what we need to improve on.
Absolutely. I think that it's a really interesting time to kind of think about our approaches and really take our lessons that we've learned from this school year and apply them in ways that help support students. Like I'm excited about the idea of, we've done a lot of individualized instruction over Zoom because it's really challenging with elementary school students to teach a whole class over Zoom. And so what we've done is really focus on small group instruction, and we've been able to like really target kids' needs that way. And I'm excited to kind of bring that back to the classroom and structure our schedules in ways that are going to make that happen more effectively. But I think I agree with you, Ms. Moore. I think it's an exciting time to do research on what's working and what's not, and really gives us an opportunity to improve things about the way that we've been doing stuff.
I just wanted to also commend the focus, or appreciate the focus on community building and thinking about the full wellness of young people as being a really just critical to the academic achievement for the rest of the school year, and thinking about what have young people gone through and how do we help them process and talk about and build community. I have one question about the fifth graders. Is there anything we're thinking about, given where they've landed the school year, about for their transition to middle school? I mean, in terms of either talking with parents or just thinking about that transition to their new school?
Yeah, that's a great question. We are hosting a week-long summer program for our graduated fifth graders. And so I think that one of the things that we need to work on there is like, making sure that they have the readiness to like the study skills, that they're ready to kind of approach middle school with their full potential. But DCI, we've also been collaborating with the member schools in DCI. We've had several meetings with them. And so we send their data to them, and we work with them to make sure that students are placed in the right classes, and that they really know, the needs of the students before they arrive in the building for that school. So I think that is also a way that we are addressing that, but it's a great question.
Great, thanks.
All right, any other questions? All right, thank you, Julia, for that report.
Thank you. Thank you all. Have a lovely rest of your morning.
All right.
Julia.
Please let me know if there's anything else I can pull together for you all.
Thank you.
For sure. Okay, next on the agenda is the executive director's report. We're going to give Erica a little bit of time to catch up with audio. And given that she's having trouble with the audio, if you have questions along the way, I'm going to ask you to put them in the chat. That way she can see them in real time and we don't have to interrupt since we're having some technology lag. Over to you, Erica.
Thank you. Thank you, Heather. Can you guys hear me? Okay. There appears to be about a 20-second, my audio is about 20 seconds delayed from my video. So it's kind of been messing with my mind a little bit this morning, but I am going to push through. Okay. In addition, I am getting feedback of my own audio, so I'm having to listen to myself speak. So I'm just, please bear with me. So I wanted to start this morning with our re-entry status. We've been talking about our re-entry and reopening plans for the last couple of months. We have begun to execute our plans. Brought in our first groups of students in March. These were our students, our highest priority students. They have been in the buildings for several weeks now and are getting accustomed to in-person attendance. They prepared the way for the second group of students who came in, which was our pre and kindergarten students who came back at the end of April in a limited hybrid model, an AB model, 2 weeks in and 2 weeks out. Our other in-person activity has surrounded around an organization called Urban Adventure Squads. And they have been providing field trips for all of our students since the end, well, not all of our students, for certain groups, certain grade levels of students since the end of April. So I mentioned earlier the highest priority student. It was like a trial run for a group of students. It allowed for some additional time for our staff and our operational and instructional staff to plan for our pre-K re-entry. It also enabled us that period to kind of pressure test protocols and procedures that we had put in place for social distancing and to comply with all of the COVID regulations, including our health screenings, keeping students appropriately social distance requires practice, reminding students and staff to wear the masks at all times is just a habit that we're going to have to build. So we had that period of time to practice. With our pre-K and kindergarten students, we've got about 180 between both campuses. Again, it's a hybrid model where group is in for 2 weeks while the other is learning virtual, and then there's a switch for 2 weeks. This pre-K entry has been much smoother than the CARES classes because of all of the lessons that we learned during that time with those smaller groups of students. One really good thing that it's done as well as is to recreate or really increase the morale of the staff that's been in the buildings. There's been some hesitancy by staff, a little trepidation about coming back into the buildings, but once they're in, people are really excited to see each other, and it's just one step toward rebuilding our community. So I mentioned the Urban Adventure Squad earlier. This is a partnership that we've had with this organization for about 5 years. They focus on providing learning experiences using the District of Columbia as their classroom. All of their activities are outside based. And historically, they've worked with us during winter break and spring break and summer break, but we've also had some in full-time activities the last couple of years. And so since the end of April, they've been taking students one grade level at a time, first through fifth grade, out for organized field trips for both students and families. They've done Black History tours and some bird watching, wilderness survival, but the students are really excited to come together and have an opportunity to socialize and also have learning time as well. Really exciting news that I think it was Robin who asked earlier about the fifth grade, and we are excited that we'll be able to have a graduation ceremony in person for our fifth grade students. It will be held on campus. We'll have a limited number of guests to comply with the COVID health guidelines. Additional details to come, but this will be our largest in-person activity since COVID hit, and so we're really looking forward to pulling this off. As Julia mentioned earlier, we will be having a summer school program, one grade level per week. In-person programming, we will have activities for our pre-K students, outdoor gatherings throughout the month of July, but they will not have the indoor opportunities during the summer. We're also offering virtual programming for summer school for those families that don't want to bring their students back into the school yet. Throughout this.
Erica. There are a couple of questions in the chat about why Urban Adventure Squad is not being offered at the East End.
Heather, I see that you're talking. I'm going to wait to get the audio.
In the chat.
They're focused on Brooklyn. I'm not sure, actually, I thought about that before the meeting started. There may be students, first grade students who are participating. If, I think, Ms. Galladay, you might have an idea. But if they are not working with that first grade at East End, we could talk to them about doing so.
It looks like in the chat, I mean, overall, is there a plan for offering this kind of educative experience at both campuses? So even if it's not Urban Adventure Squad, I know you have to wait.
Absolutely. There is a plan. Some of this is based on Urban Adventure Squad's capacity. They're just ramping up their activities again. But the more business they get, the more associates they have to run their programming. But if we can find similar programming with organizations for East End, we will do that as well. Okay, and there's also currently Urban Adventure Squad at East End virtually.
They actually ended that one.
All right.
They ended that one in April, the virtual.
I see that Ms. Galladay is speaking. I have not gotten the audio yet. I want to double check that because I just got a message from the person on staff who's working closely with Urban Adventure Squad that says there are virtual options with Urban Adventure Squads right now for East End. So we'll just double check. Okay. So on to the structure of next school year. You are probably all aware that Mayor Bowser has set the expectation that next school year, all instruction will be in person to all students 5 days a week. Distance learning will be available to students who submit medical certification from a physician saying that there's a medical reason why they will not be able to participate in person. In all of our calculations through both of the campuses, looking at the square footage, with the recent reduction of social distancing requirements from 6 to 3 feet, our East End campus can accommodate all of our students. Our Brooklyn campus will need to have some additional space. And we've known this for a while, and so we've been looking at multiple options for additional facility space for the last few months. We have looked at modular building options. We have visited other commercial facilities that could be for temporary school space. We have checked with the DC Department of Parks and Recreation to ask about the availability of their facility space. For example, at Turkey Thicket, they have a couple of classrooms that could potentially be available for use. We have decided that we are going to move forward with this modular building option because it is the most cost efficient. We will be able to start bringing in these modular buildings very shortly and get them set up on our Brooklyn campus. It is the option that we believe works best for us. As Bill mentioned earlier, this is a fairly hefty investment of about $200,000 for 3 modular units. We'll have them for a 10-month lease. This will provide us for 3 additional classrooms. We're going to put 2 of the modular units in the lower parking lot and 1 modular unit in the upper parking lot. And the DME is also the Deputy Mayor for Education, and his office has stated that they will assist schools because we're not the only school that's going to process, but they will assist schools in the permitting process to expedite our ability to get these up and running, and also as we'll be losing parking spaces, his office is going to help us with acquiring parking permits for school staff as well. You also heard Bill mention earlier during his budget review that we will need additional staff next year, particularly because we're spreading out in more spaces. We're in the middle of a hiring frenzy right now. We've just finished hiring about 14 support staff for in-person instructional support between the 2 campuses. As Bill mentioned, we're adding a 3rd grade class at the East End campus, so we will need to staff it, and we'll be bringing in additional teachers for Brooklyn classrooms. One of the things that we have done in terms of staffing this year as well is to formalize some of our internal processes for hiring, promoting into new positions, advertising available positions. And this is in response to some work that we've been doing with Promise 54, a local organization to promote equity and inclusion in our hiring and talent practices. Several of our current employees have expressed interest in moving into different roles with more responsibilities. There are teachers who are interested in becoming coaches. There are others who are interested in working as student support staff. And so we're going through the process of interviewing internally also to hire for some of these positions. Some updates on our vaccination status of our staff. Yesterday, we learned that approximately 70% of our staff are now fully vaccinated. 15% approximately of our staff has received vaccination or they're scheduled to receive vaccines, and 50% of our staff are not planning to receive vaccinations at this time. And just as a reminder, Stokes School is not making vaccinations mandatory for staff. There are staff who have valid reasons not to get vaccines. So we're having one-on-one conversations with staff who believe that they have medical conditions that will prevent them from coming back into the school, to identify how we will move forward with them next year. Okay. Tracy, I see that you were saying something. Okay. Yes, I'm looking in the chat and responding to Ms. Galladay's question about testing. And the question is, sorry, any plan on testing that you could share, any associated communication results? We have a very robust testing plan that we are implementing for students and staff. Currently, we are testing once a week, but we are about to start testing. Currently, we are testing a percentage of our staff and students once a week, but we are about to start testing 100% of students and staff. We have protocols in place for if there is a positive result that is found in any of our testing. Fortunately, to date, in the several weeks that we've been back, we have not had any positive cases, and we attribute that to the pretty robust protocols that we put in place. But if we do find positive cases, there is a protocol that we follow in order to notify the pod that person is in. They will get specific information that someone within their pod has been notified. And then outside of the pod, there are protocols for general communication with the school community about notification of positive tests. The last thing that I wanted to say is just that our next steps, we had yesterday a staff meeting with our full staff to talk about the most recent iteration of our reentry plan, specifically about the fact that we will have modular units on the Brooklyn campus. The timeline for reentry, the dates for our school calendar. We will have next Thursday a staff town hall with parents to discuss all of our updates. We've already sent out much of this information in writing, but we want to have an opportunity to speak in person with parents next week.
Given some of Ms. Galladay's questions about the protocol and communications, I do think it would be helpful, Erica, for us to decide when is the final point or final draft of the reentry plan, and then share that with trustees. And maybe it could be something that we include when we discuss budget. So that would mean if we call an additional meeting for June, or if we are able to connect in July, being able to hear about those. The other thing I heard you say is that there's a town hall next week. Can you just say again the specifics so that trustees could join that?
The parent staff town hall will be next Thursday, which I believe is let me pull up my calendar very quickly. Next Thursday at 5:30, I will send out an invitation to board members if you are interested in joining. And one other thing that I wanted to say about, our reentry plan, the OSSE, the Office of the State Superintendent of Education, is requiring that all schools submit to them something called the Continuous Education Plan. It is all of the protocols and procedures that we will have in place for everything from social distancing to our lunch plans, to our testing, COVID testing plans, to our instructional recovery plans will be covered in that CEP. That is the application for the 21-22 continuous education plan will open for schools hopefully next week to start working on. It will be due at the end of June. And I think that's the plan that would be the most appropriate one to share with the board because it will be comprehensive. It is also a plan that OSSE will need to improve. OSSE will need to approve in order for us to move forward with our reentry.
Are there any other trustee questions or discussion that we would want to have for the executive director report? I want to make a little space given our audio lag. So if you can give me an emotion, one of those reaction things that you're good, or if you can come on and tell me.
I guess the OSSE report will provide more information, or the town hall, so I'll wait for that. Thanks.
Great. Okay. Well, we can actually move to closing the meeting on our agenda. We do need to have an executive session. And so we can, I don't really remember all of the specifics about what we need to close this and go into executive session, which would, I think, mean we go off of YouTube. Yeah. So we're going to go off of YouTube. Trustees, we just have a little bit of business to follow up on executive session issues. I don't know how to say it more eloquently. So we're going to conclude the public portion and go to our executive meeting and adjourn.